Good morning.
Good morning, Miss LeBlanc.
Welcome for our last capstone presentation. Our last presenter is Ms. Gabrielle LeBlanc, and today she'll be presenting on the following thesis. Play and wonder, as characteristics of being childlike, are essential to human flourishing, not only for children, but for human beings at any age. Please welcome Gabrielle.
During a conclave, an elderly cardinal approached Carol Wojtyła to chastise him. He said, "Your Eminence, I heard that you swim, climb mountains, and bike. I find this highly inappropriate for a prince of the church." The future pope said, "But did you not know that 50% of the cardinals in Poland do this?" His answer was clever because, at the time, Poland only had 2 cardinals. Pope St. John Paul the Great. As a young boy, he was a poet and sportsman. At 21, he co-founded a theater group where he was an actor and playwright. As a young priest, he took his youth group on hiking excursions. He combined catechesis with adventure because he understood how the beauty of creation reveals the wonder of its creator, instilling awe in its observers. During his time as pope, he took frequent trips to ski and swim and had a huge emphasis on the youth. He was the sportsman pope. Although his physical conditions began to hinder him later on in his life, he was still very involved in the sport world. He played throughout his entire life. This holy man and patron of our school is an excellent example of remaining childlike. But why? Why did he choose to live this way, and what did he have to accomplish this? Wonder. It is seen in every human being, from the child learning about the world to the philosopher. For Plato once said, "For this feeling of wonder shows that you are a philosopher, since wonder is the only beginning of philosophy." Our wonder leads us to question. Our questions lead us to discovery, and our discovery leads us to knowledge. For this process to happen smoothly, man must be able to play. But the word play is seen today as only for children. It is a childish action. This, however, is quite far from the truth. Play and wonder, as characteristics of being childlike, are essential to human flourishing, not only for children, but for human beings at any age. It is important to first distinguish the difference in between childlike and childish. Childish has negative connotations. The word describes foolish, immature, or juvenile behavior. In comparison, childlikeness deals with the positive aspects of being like a child: youthful, eager to learn, joyful, unfeigned, and pure. There are 2 important aspects of childlikeness. The first is recognizing one's lowliness, and the second, acknowledging one's helplessness and need for dependency. As a child, he must recognize that he is lower than others, physically and intellectually. Children understand that they do not know everything. A quality of truly being childlike is humility. Through this humility, a child is left in awe of what he does not understand. This awe turns into a desire to know. The wonder the child experiences can fuel his search for knowledge. Through this humility which a child has, he is truly a student of life and is ready to explore the things that he does not understand. I want you to take a minute and think of a time where you were able to witness extreme beauty. Maybe it was in nature and scenery. Maybe it was a glowing sunset or majestic mountains. What did you feel like? Did you feel small in comparison to such majestic beauty? Were you in awe? This feeling that you experienced was wonder. Wonder is defined as rapt attention or astonishment at something new to one's mysterious, at something awesomely mysterious or new to one's experience. Wonder is the driving force that leads man to discovery and knowledge. If one did not wonder why the sky is blue, then there would be no motivation for him to learn that the blue light from the sun is scattered and redirected all throughout Earth's atmosphere. If Aristotle never wondered why we think the Earth is flat, would we still have come to the discovery that the Earth is a sphere? If Josh was not fascinated with his Miata, would we have heard that excellent example in his capstone yesterday? It first starts with an astonishment at an observation that then leads to a question. Without wonder, man would not be motivated to discover. An outlet to allow mankind to immerse himself in his wonder is play. Play is defined as an activity that is carried out for the purpose of amusement and fun. It is approached with an enthusiastic and in-the-moment attitude and is highly interactive. If there are other things intrinsically motivating play, they do not take away from the action of playing itself, if its primary goal is enjoyment and fun. Ultimately, it is still play as long as its goal is to enjoy the activity. One of the most memorable times I was able to experience play was my junior pilgrimage. Because we were not able to go to Rome during the school year, we spent most of our time at a retreat center with little to no schedule. Therefore, we had to come up with our own fun, and it was incredible. Granted, we weren't filling our time trying to keep busy with tons of activities. What we did do was essentially waste our time together. We painted, sang, played instruments, played gaga ball, gazed at the stars, or sometimes just spent our time together laying in the grass, enjoying our company and conversation. During that time, I was able to more fully understand what it means to play. There's another aspect of play that does not mean merely a game of soccer or hide-and-go-seek. It is ultimately a disposition. Whether or not someone allows themselves to play is up to them. Any ordinary task can be play if you allow it to be so. At first, this can be challenging, but it is possible for every person to incorporate play into their day. Play, which allows man to act on his wonder, leads to human flourishing. I will be defining human flourishing as an individual improvement or development that helps the common good. In Gaudium Spes, the common good is defined as the sum of those conditions of social life which allow social groups and their individual members relatively thorough access and ready access to their own fulfillment. As previously stated, wonder leads to knowledge. Growing in knowledge promotes the development of the human mind. When humanity as a whole focuses on growing in knowledge of the truth for the improvement of human life, humanity can and will flourish. Now, there are different stages to human life. One stage in life that it may seem difficult for an individual to experience play and wonder is adulthood. Unfortunately, the scope of research in this area of adults playing is limited. There are a few speculations as why this is so. Some say it is because there's a lack of understanding of what the word play means. Brooke Feeney, from the Social and Personality Psychology Compass, believes that there is a lack of research because some propose that play is not socially acceptable in adulthood, and adults play little to none as a result. According to societal norms, adults are expected to be productive, whether at work or at home. If play is not viewed as a productive means to spend one's time, then play among adults will be perceived as frivolous, overindulgent, or irresponsible. This expectation is one that is pushed by the worldly views of success. To be successful, you have to be serious and uniform. Those who do not fit this standard will be taken as a joke. But play is not a childish waste of time. Play is in line with the nature of adults as well, and therefore, when they can partake in it, they will flourish. This can be seen when looking at adults who have been given the opportunity to work in an environment that incorporates play into the workplace. April Everett of the University of North Carolina, Greensboro says, "In a lifetime, we will spend more than 90,000 hours on the job, too much time to not have fun while we are there. Many public organizations have been forced to operate on a strained budget. Existing staff must now accomplish twice the work with half the resources. A solution that Everett proposes to help mitigate the increase of strain in the workplace is to implement play. In a few studies done by the Management Research Review, research shows that playing on the job enhances employee motivation and productivity, reduces stress, increases customer satisfaction, lowers emotional exhaustion, and emotional distance. Many companies have reported an increase in productivity and customer service satisfaction as a result of incorporating fun philosophy into the workplace." An example in which I was able to see my work work as play for the first time was during a modern world class. We were having a seminar on Dante's Inferno. Mrs. Fonte, who was Mrs. Sagers at the time, was allowing us to reach conclusions on our own. This was the first time that I saw a task like this enjoyable. Through our discussion, my class and I was able to draw connections that we wouldn't have been able to come to on our own. When we allowed ourselves to immerse ourselves in our work and enjoy it, it became more fruitful. I find this to be one of the first times I participated in my classwork simply because I was able to enjoy it. It was also one of the first times I considered my work to be play. For adults to be more comfortable to partake in play, there needs to be a better universal understanding of what play is and what it can be. Play is not for a specific age group. It is not a childish activity meant only for the young. If adults take their everyday tasks and have a playful disposition when carrying them out, their qualities of life will improve. But I think you may be asking yourselves, is play important in every aspect of the human life? Well, the Catechism of the Catholic Church says, the human person created in the image of God is a being at once corporal and spiritual. Since man is a physical and spiritual being, he must take into account his spiritual life if he truly desires to flourish. For Christians, attaining heaven is the end goal of life. Christ, during his mission on earth, gave his followers lessons on how they might attain heaven. An example of this is seen in Matthew 18, 3-4. On the way back from a long journey, Jesus' disciples were discussing who would be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Upon hearing this, Christ called a child over into their midst and said, "Amen, I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever receives one child such as these in my name receives me." What does Christ mean when he says that those who wish to enter the kingdom of heaven must be children? And is childlikeness really necessary to fully enter into the human and Christian life? In Pope John Paul the Great's letter to children in the Year of the Family, he says, "Is not Jesus pointing to children as models even for grown-ups? In children, there is something that must never be missing in people who want to enter the kingdom of heaven. People who are destined to go to heaven are simple, like children, and like children, are full of trust, rich in goodness, and pure. Only people of this sort can find in God a Father, and thanks to Jesus, can become in their own turn children of God." When the disciples were quarreling about who would be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, Christ reminds them that they need to worry about whether they got into the kingdom of heaven at all before worrying about greatness. To do so requires humility. Keeping this in mind, Christ placed the child in their midst. He holds being like a child as the model to which one is able to enter heaven. In the humble state of a child, there is an explicit pronouncement of grace to those who seemingly are unworthy of the kingdom. Childlikeness is a characteristic of all true disciples, because it is only through God's mercy that a person can enter the kingdom of heaven. Without being childlike, man cannot achieve the end goal of heaven. Once one has the humility like a child, his spiritual life will flourish. In Veritatis Splendor, John Paul the Great says, "The Spirit of Jesus, received by the humble and docile heart of the believer, brings about the flourishing of the Christian moral life, and the witness of holiness amid the great variety of vocations, gifts, responsibilities, conditions, and life situations." Childlikeness, as well as wonder, is necessary in the spiritual life. When one has true childlike faith, his lack of understanding of God turns into wonder. This wonder leads man to glorify the Lord in all of his splendor. When a truly childlike man encounters God, his love and wonder of the Lord leads him to want to know the Lord. One of the ways in which man can act on this wonder is through play. Play, when applied to the spiritual life, looks very similar to play in other aspects of our lives. It is taking the situation that life situations that life will put us through, and not letting them control us. This is an idea discussed in Father Jacques Philippe's book, Interior Freedom. In the book, he uses the example of a saint who is extremely well known for her childlikeness, Saint Therese of Lisieux. He mentions how, no matter what happened, she would pass the day peacefully and was never upset. This was because it was her will to accept everything. Applying this to our own lives and our understanding of play, we can offer everything we do and every situation we are put in, not only with acceptance, but with joy, knowing that we can give our suffering up to the Lord. Thinking back to my senior pilgrimage in the mountains, there are so many examples of play and wonder, and my experiences in being able to live those out. Whether it was looking at the vast scenery of Columbine Pass or Peking Jupiter, I was able to see that through the creations, I was able to encounter the Creator in a way that I was not able to before. Pope John Paul the Great, in one of his general audiences, talks about this wonder. He says, "So, in beholding the glory of the Trinity in creation, man must contemplate, sing, and rediscover wonder. In contemporary society, people become indifferent, not for lack of wonders, but for lack of wonder. For the believer, to contemplate creation is also to hear a message, to listen to a paradoxical and silent voice. Play should be seen as a useful tool rather than a childish waste of time. Being childlike in the spiritual life is a necessity. Jesus Christ tells his followers that only the childlike can enter the kingdom of heaven. To be spiritually childlike, it means one must have complete dependency on God. For the spiritual life to truly flourish, one must take God as their Father. It is important for those who know these truths to go out and implement them. Without play and wonder, man will begin to become stale to life and the questions it provokes. In preserving play and wonder, man preserves one of the basic attributes of being human, our ability to discover and grow through knowledge. The beauty of it is that there is no end to what we can learn, only an end to our willingness to do so. As G.K. Chesterton said, the world will never starve for wants of wonder, but only for want of wonder. For humanity to flourish, each of us must put aside our pride and become like children. We must acknowledge and accept that we are limited. The only way we can do this is through the power of the Father. Through the dependency of the Father, we are brought to the Son. For Jesus said, "Let the children come to me." Thank you.
Do we have any faculty questions?
Mr. Alvarado.
Thank you, Gabrielle. So, can you give all the excerpts from sacred scripture that talk about play? I'm just playing with you.
I see what you did there.
So, as we know, all the virtues, except charity, but all the other virtues are found balancing two extremes. Usually, when something is deficient and when something is excessive, right? So, like courage is this middle ground between the coward and the risky fool. So I'm wondering, you did a great job talking about the deficit of play, like when there's a deficit of play in someone's life, but what are the problems when it's excessive?
Thank you for your question. So when I'm defining play, I talk about how it's any activity that is carried out for enjoyment and fun. Now, this doesn't get into whether those activities are good or not. So when play is disconnected with being childlike and the humility that childlikeness requires, it can go to that extreme. Some examples would be an overindulgence in things that we find enjoyable. So the excessive amount of video games, not that video games are bad, but when one partakes in them all the time and starts placing them above God and things like that. So when play starts to become something that is replacing what should be our God, then that is when it becomes more on the other extreme rather than a deficit.
Thank you, Gabrielle.
Thank you, Mr. Alvarado. Mr. Fay? Mr. Fay.
Thanks, Gabrielle. I'm thinking about your story about your junior year pilgrimage. It sounds like your Rome trip got canceled, and I don't know anything about it, but it sounds like you were kind of put in a deserted building with a field around it. And it sounds like there's a huge opportunity there for you guys to become bitter and resentful. Okay? And it sounds like you, at least, didn't do that. So, building on that, I'm wondering if you have any advice for all the students in this room to take, how can you take these situations and turn them into something that's actually beautiful or amazing? You see, like what kind of disposition is necessary? What virtues should they try to cultivate? Things like that.
So, one clarification, Mr. Fay. Are you more talking about when we have downtime and time that we need to fill up?
I guess that's an example of when it's particular, yes, although I do think that this should be a spirit that kind of enchants everything you do.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fay. So in light of our Rome pilgrimage getting canceled, there was some disappointment to begin with. And so with that came an acceptance. And like I talked about, to be playful means that you can accept anything that gets brought to you in life and being able to enjoy that through that. So for our junior pilgrimage, we had the opportunity to spend time and do things that we enjoyed. And I think one of the things that it required in light of the disappointment was a humility that, okay, I can't control the situation right now, so I'm going to do what I can to make it the best possible thing. Thanks to my amazing class, we all decided to partake in activities that brought us closer to the Creator. We mimicked Him, we created, we sang, just partook in that joy that we had. So I would say to all of you students, first, recognize that there's a lot of things that you won't be able to control, and that's okay. Some of the things outside of our control might be for our own good, and we might not be able to accept that at times. So in situations that you're placed in, maybe without choice, I would say, remember that you are little, and remember that you have a Father that is taking care of you every step of the way. And so when we're able to recognize that I'm being taken care of right now, and that I'm living for the purpose of glorifying the Lord, then instead of living for ourselves, we're living for others. And it makes life so much more enjoyable when you know that I'm doing this for someone. And so I guess applying that to my junior pilgrimage, we were able to glorify the Lord in that aspect, and it was very beneficial. Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Gabrielle. I found that as students tend to grow older, they are more likely to lose this sense of play. So I was wondering if you had any ideas about how, especially upper school students, could recapture the sense of play with regard to their
Thank you, Mr. Gray. So, if we've lost, or we feel like we've lost our childlike wonder, especially in our academics, I think most importantly, it first starts with obedience. The fourth commandment, obey your father and mother. God has placed authority over us through our teachers, and so we need to be obedient to that. We might not understand why we're being told to do things that we seem to be pointless. I know I experienced that, and I struggled with that. If I found something to be pointless, I didn't want to do it. It just wasn't enjoyable. But going back to childlikeness, when we have the recognition that we are little and we don't know everything, then I think there sort of becomes a trust in between the teacher and the student. You trust that the teacher knows what's best for you, and especially at this school, the teachers love you and they do want what's best for you. So that is something you can rest in. So with our academics, we need to be able to trust our teachers and know that this is for my benefit, even if I don't understand it. And so I think through that obedience can come an enjoyment, because then once we realize that this is for my own good, and instead of seeing it as a burden, we see it as an opportunity, not to live for ourselves, but to live for others, for our teachers, for God. Every assignment that we get is an opportunity to glorify God, because He has given us gifts and talents that we can give back to Him. And one way we can do that is through our assignments. And so I think, yes, obedience, recognizing that you are little and you don't know everything that's going on, and then recognizing that you're doing this for another, not just yourself.
Thank you.
Mr. Hanson.
Thank you, Gabrielle. I've heard of the existence of a family kickball league in Lafayette, where families compete against each other, everyone comes and plays. And I'm curious if you think that this, or if you know of maybe other things like it, could be the type of thing that would help remind adults to play.
Thank you for that, Mr. Hanson. Yes, I definitely think that a family kickball team would help remind adults to play, because, like I had said, there seems to be, this disposition in society that adults shouldn't play. It's, frivolous, juvenile, but there shouldn't have to be a sociable excuse for adults to play. But I think in this case, it is an outlet for adults to reconnect with what it means to have fun, and doing a task that doesn't really have a purpose. Ultimately, those tasks will lead to a better unification of the family, and I guess a love of play. And so that would be something that I would suggest every family doing, maybe having more family activities just to bring back specifically the parents to what it means to have fun.
And one quick follow-up. I have this idea of adults crafting a relationship with their children or with youth in general that John Paul II was a huge proponent of, that you spoke so well about. I'm just curious if you could say a little more about the idea of what it means for adults to seek to craft a relationship with, especially with youth around them, and even maybe the way that what they receive in return is as important as what they give.
Thank you for your question. So, in the nature of being a child, they are lower than others. And I think one of the problems that parents have a hard time addressing is being able to stoop down to their level, to the level of a child. And so for adults, for parents, and adults as well, teachers as well, for them to be able to cultivate a better relationship with children, it first starts with them also being childlike. And so being more humble and recognizing that I do not know everything and this child does not know everything. Patience is a big thing. I think we see a lot, specifically in movies, like this trope of children continuously asking why, and the parents end up snapping because it can get annoying. But I think that a way to combat that is patience. Patience and humility is what I would say.
Thank you.
We have time for one senior question. Are there any senior questions?
Gavin.
Thank you for your presentation, Gabrielle.
Welcome.
I was wondering, how do you know if you're playing in a childlike manner versus a childish manner? Like, what's the difference between them?
Thank you for that, Gavin. So, one way that I would suggest you contemplate this is by asking yourself some questions on whether or not your play is good. So, looking at the activity itself, ask yourself if this activity will help me glorify God. Will it lead me closer to God? If it's yes, then am I worried about this activity? So, this is more pertaining to when we want to try and make situations that are our control, if we want to turn that into play. And so, if we do find ourselves worried, we need to ask ourselves, is it because I lack trust in God? Like, do I think He won't take care of me? And if that's the case, you need to recognize that, no, God is taking care of me, and this isn't something I need to worry about. And another important aspect of whether or not it's true good play, is it bringing me closer, and am I encountering the Creator through His creations? That's how I would say we look for good play. The difference between childish play and childlike play, kind of like what I had said earlier, an overindulgence in the things that we enjoy to where it starts to become an idol. That's not very childlike, that's not very humble of us to start placing things over our Creator. And so if the play itself causes us down a path of sin, then that I would consider childish play rather than childlike play.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gabrielle.